Intro. American Idiot is an album by Green Day that really shows the way that history was the American government's response to 9/11. From the lyrics to the way that it inspired an underground movement in a way to protest against the government at the time, the album was shown to be a success. A big success actually just because this launched the band into a close to mainstream position where people knew who they were and stuff like that. But the lyrics are not the only thing that matters for the album. What also matters is the time period the album was released in. So for that, we should know the background a little bit for it. The year is 2001. In New York City, seems like it's going to have just another day. Another safe day with no harm. But this is no ordinary day, as it's a day that would go down in history as an important day. 9/11, we all know it. We all learn about it in schools on the day. It's a day that happened, but the day is what led to the response afterwards. Afterwards, the war on terror was the thing that began. It meant trying to find bin Laden after finding out Al-Qaeda was behind the attacks. They were found to be in one country, that being Afghanistan. Now, for the purposes of this, we're not going to cover the entire thing that happened up until bin Laden's death. That's a different conversation. So, we keep fighting there, and we keep fighting, and we just keep going, and so that's all that really happens in the war on terror. But wait, that's Afghanistan. But this other country in the Middle East, that isn't Afghanistan. That is Iraq. And Iraq is also a Middle Eastern country, was a dictator who may have been friends with, like, the country in the past. That's somewhere else that could and possibly may hold that war and terror mentality that we have to defeat in it. So, what's a way that we could justify attacking that random country? So, they thought and had many thoughts, and they were like, well, we already have this act that basically lets us spy on all our citizens. So, what should we use? And then it hit them. Now, it takes a lot of work, and I mean a lot, to justify putting a second war on the ground. Sending more soldiers into another country. Well, one, you have to justify it. So, what's a very patriotic American thing that you can spread? Democracy. And we could also just say there's terror there, and there's people in their government who support terrorism. Also, we don't want them getting a WMD. Now, do we? You may be asking what evidence we have for all these claims and justifications for the war. So in March of 2003, the U.S. started the Iraq War to get rid of those pesky WMDs. This includes sending missiles to Iraq, and specifically Baghdad, which you'll never guess, but that's their capital. Well, not anymore, was the amount of soldiers and tanks and missiles we send there. But guys, it's justified. So the taxpayer dollars of 2003 and 2004 continued to go towards the effort to capture Saddam Hussein. Now, is this going to happen swiftly and quickly? Was an in-and-out mission? Yeah, just ignore that part, because the Iraq War must be popular. Because IDK, bro, look at the facts. All these senators and people in Congress voted for it, so you're just going against your country. I don't know what to tell you. After constant missiles to hit innocent buildings in a big city, and a lot of taxpayer dollars later, there started to form a silent movement of people underground who were kind of against the war. Still, this is not far away from 9/11, so the idea of terror still reigns in people's minds. This, and also the USA Patriot Act, which, by the way, is an acronym, is taken into effect. But then that brings us to the release of the song and album of American Idiot, which was released in late 2004. It did numbers in the charts and such, but the lyrics are also important, so we could go over those first. We can start with the song that shares the same name as the album, that being American Idiot. The song is about how post 9/11 America has changed to become more of a scared state. Everyone was afraid of panic, and everyone was in a panic because death was seen as this thing that was going to come anytime soon because terror just happened. When it says in the song, "One nation controlled by the media," it kind of refers to how much the media played an important part in the post 9/11 world. It had the sense of giving information and making sure you had to be part of the news. You needed all this information inside your brain because, terror could strike at any moment, and this was before YouTube and stuff like that. Which would, of course, lead to what the next lyric is, information age of hysteria, and which refers to the aftermath of what happens when you have and feel like, when you feel like you need so much information. Since we all know negative press sells more than the positive press, it's more likely to cause anxiety in whoever is consuming it. It's just how the news evolves, really. Also, this and the constant opinions that were kind of put into the news also helped with this rise of inflammatory images and words that made people grow worried and grow more attached to the events that happen. It's making someone scared and kind of putting them down so that they're more likely to listen to you. Okay, because picture this, right? You just witnessed the biggest attack on the U.S. in a long time. And the news stations are covering it. Doesn't matter which station, they just hit the towers. And the next day, there's more news. There's more news for the days that come because this is out of nowhere. So you'll expect the next one to happen anytime soon. It's also the idea of being glued to the TV to validate an opinion. Oh, someone from Evil Land over there said this, so you better be scared. You best be scared, reads the news station people. But that's just how it is. People are on the television, and they seem to have more power than those who protest. At the time, most of the news stations also framed the war differently. 'Twas a different time. So this was seen as liberating Iraq. The early part of the war was seen as us bringing freedom to Iraq and just getting rid of Saddam Hussein from power. Because that guy was a dictator. That was the point of it. But after Saddam was captured, efforts for the war had really been a bit extra. Because the main mission's done. What else are you gonna do? It really seemed like a waste of effort and a waste of taxpayer dollars. So, of course, when you're just burning money, people are gonna be mad. So this led to people wanting change in the later years of the Iraq War. So kind of around late 2003 to late 2004, around that time when this album came out, and when it came out, the support for the Iraq War was dwindling. And so, of course, with dwindling support comes the fun protests that accompany it. The iconic protest and some riots, but eventually it culminated into society kind of wanting a change. A change in the approach to the war, but also a societal change. But, wait, that'd make you weak, and that would get you called the F-slur for gay people. I can't say it, I'm not gay, I'm not in that group. But you know which one it is. But it was meant to mean soft, in a way. It's like if some frat guy came up to you and said, "What, dude, you can't handle war? Look at this little dweeb." Except he wouldn't use dweeb. At the time, it was just due to partisan lines because a lot of the time the, conservatives, quote, who people would call rednecks at the time. This term also appears in the song Holiday, which is later in the album. This is also a song that, you guessed it, criticizes the U.S. government at the time. as expected from Green Day, but it deals with the actual Iraq war as compared with the war on, like, terror and the war at home. This song has more lyrics directed at the President of the U.S. at the time, or as some would call him, the POTUS. In the lines like Sig Heil to the President Gasman, which is like a direct attack in the song, the line talks about the connection George W. Bush had with the oil in the Middle East. That's what Gasman means, but it's also one way to actively rebel against the way a government is operating, since that's what the lyrics are going for. That's totally what they are. Sure, if the music reaches nobody, it's probably not going to make a difference. But then again, Green Day is a big band, so it didn't reach nobody. It reached actual people. So when you have a band like this with a message people may actually listen to and listen to what they're saying, especially when it's through somewhat subtle lyrics, which also reference different parts of U.S.'s history, this being the war on Vietnam and another way the war in Korea, but also a lot of other ones. This is just because of how the U.S. works, basically. On the world stage, beyond the U.S. can be seen as the world police. So, if a government is bad, then the military will get involved. They're most likely. Go in, overthrow the government a little bit, and make sure they are more aligned with the U.S. values. This, for the folks who don't know, the term is called a regime change. And sometimes they become regime change wars, like in Vietnam or Korea. For some context, it was because communism was at the north side of each country, and we needed to defend capitalism down in the south. Not the hyper-capitalist type, oh no, just the one that aligned with our values. Now, of course, we put a bunch of military towards defending that. Fast forward a bunch of years and a bunch of money, and spoiler alert, we tied in Korea and we lost in Vietnam. So, those don't count in the long run. But, anyways, back to Iraq. Same poop, different toilet. Regime change because a dictator is against the U.S. values now compared to then. Let's put in somebody who loves us. And that's what we did, basically. Also, bam, terrorism afterwards the size of Indiana. That's for a future thing, though. The album was already long out before that started. But anyways, there is also a tale that is told throughout this album about a man called Jesus from Suburbia. This is supposed to kind of represent the average person who's a rebel. It represents somebody who wants to leave his town, who wants change, and wants all that pizzazz. The song is pretty long, but it tells the life of Jimmy, which is the actual name of Jesus from Suburbia. So let's call him that because it's shorter. Since the song is so long, it's really broken up into 5 different parts, which represent 5 different parts of Jimmy's life. The first part is about his drug addiction and how it makes him a loser, an outcast on the side of the street. He's like one of those people on the sidewalks. But the second part is about his town. His loser town that he doesn't feel connected to. Whether that be because of like social values in the town being different from him, or because the town doesn't have the greatest people. Sometimes that just happens. Sometimes people just aren't connected to their town. But it also may be because some towns are empty. They just are. The idea of rust belts in dying towns is something prevalent in a lot of media. Especially now. It's like a main thing. It's a topic. This idea that a town is dying and doesn't have anywhere to hang out or do anything in the song, the only place Jimmy can hang out at is basically a 7-Eleven. Whoopsie. That is so sad. Being able to hang out only at a convenience store. The city he's forced to call home, basically, and stay in has nothing to its name. So, that leads to the third part about Jimmy, where he just stops caring. Why care about a nothing burger of a town, to be honest? So he kind of just stops caring about this town over time because he he's frustrated with the system that the town gives into. The song mentions at one point hearts recycled but never saved from the cradle to the grave, which talks about the way soldiers fight in war. They are seen as this thing, like these things that aren't people. They're just like a number, they're a statistic, which in the song Jimmy sees as immoral and inhumane. Reducing a human life to a number is what he sees as a broken system, a system that needs to change, and so he goes to therapy to try to fill that broken hole in his heart, but also to change his mind and fix that broken hole in his mind. He gets not that much attention or love because it's a small town with not a lot to do. So he looks for a solution. That solution, he thinks, is therapy. But in the end, Jimmy decides to just leave his town. He can't really do all that small town stuff. The gossip culture of the small town where people be talking. People gossip. We all know people gossip. But this isn't the end of his story because he also appears in Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which shows his more lonely side afterwards, to be honest. And this deals with the change that comes with leaving a small town and going to the city. Since that's what happens to Jimmy in this song. He knows nobody around him, and he realizes it's lonely. He's so lonely, and so he thinks, oh, I'm going to move out. And then he realizes how lonely it is in a big city. When you move out of your town, where you know everyone somewhat, and you know how people act to somewhere without that. Like that fun little personality, you know, that's kind of like a friend. It's that shock. It's that sudden shock. You're juxtaposed now in bam. Let's just say you're out of that gossip circle that you had originally or heard from originally. For example, in my town, we had gossip all the time. You may have never talked to any of the quote popular kids, but you heard the names of them or what happened if big drama happened. I think those kids were in every school if they had a population of at least over 20,000 people. But you get the idea. A close-knit town, like a small or medium-sized town, has that gossip and drama fly around. It's this idea of community, that you feel like you belong, that you can get since there's less people in there. If there's a small town of about 3,000 people, you may know a good portion of them because that's a very small number. Probably not the whole town, of course, but you know a good amount of them. People you went to school with, your neighbors or your neighborhood, anybody in a close vicinity to you that you're actually like interacted with, you know them. Just because that's how you know people, and that's how you kind of grow up knowing people. They were close to you, you interacted with them, and the geography kind of let them be your only options. They might also be friends. Like, there's many lines you could draw. You agree with them on some or a lot of things and disagree with them on some or a lot, but you're friends nonetheless. But when you move to this city, this big city, there's people everywhere. There's people everywhere in places you wouldn't even imagine. People are on the roofs. They're in the roofs. They're in the streets. Everywhere means everywhere. So you have so many people, but you also don't have anyone. So you have to adjust yourself to this brand new life you have, which is hard because city life is different from suburbia life. So people change, or they feel the loneliness of the refusal to change, or like catching up to them over time, or the change catching up to them. Time doesn't move on, it doesn't stay behind, and it only moves forward. But that's the story mainly behind American Idiot, or like at least the highlights of the songs in it. But it's the main idea, really, was at least Jimmy. As for the numbers, the album has sold over 23 million units and is one of their best-selling albums. But it also got some mixed reviews when it first came out, probably due to the political anti-mainstream nature of its lyrics and message. Maybe, probably. On Metacritic, it got a 79 out of 100, which is close to the 3 out of 4 USA Today gave it. Don't know why they use that metric. So it got decent reviews among those parts. Pitchfork, gave it an 82 out of 100. So if you wanted a B minus, you got it. But if you want the teacher letter grades of the albums, it got a B plus from Entertainment Weekly. That's a real way of grading it. But these scores are probably less of the substance of the album and more of the review and the landscape at the time that when it came out. Probably you can't really go against a system without expecting a little pushback. It happens when you do stuff like this, so the public perception has kind of changed over time. It turned to something more of a positive manner and as a sign of rebellion, as American Idiot is kind of heard in a lot of places as a rebel song. It's also seen as this general idea versus what it went against. Since the title song, at least, focuses more on American issues and America's issues versus what it was at the time fighting against, it feels like. So it makes sense that the song keeps appearing back in some media. It's probably also because it's a hit song. So it reached people in some ways, and some people have mixed opinions like that. Overall, American Idiot is an album that shows that it is okay to criticize things that have power like the government and the people in it. It shows the rebel side of the rock sound, which is good for the time. It also has a good tale with Jesus of Suburbia and his journey, and there's a lot of nice messages throughout the songs on the album. Personally, I would give it like an 8.7 out of 10, but you may have your own thoughts. If you do, you can comment them down below if you want to. That's your First Amendment right. But if you want to, please like and subscribe. Pretty please.